Good morning. My name is Traci Sears, and I'm the Montana National Flood Insurance Program Coordinator. I want to welcome and thank you for joining us for this session of Floodplain Bootcamp. Hopefully it's not too daunting for everyone. This is the 5th Floodplain Bootcamp series that we have put on. We originally did this back in COVID. We had quite a few new DNRC employees, but we also offered it up to a lot of our local floodplain administrators, and we've had a request to continue to do this series every year. So just wanted, as part of this kickoff session, we just want to let everyone know that the whole purpose of the Floodplain Bootcamp was really mainly designed for those individuals who are new to floodplain management or who would like to explore becoming a certified floodplain manager. And we'll talk about that in just a bit. We also have floodplain managers throughout the state who like to jump on the series to kind of obtain additional information or maybe use it as an annual refresher. But whatever has brought you to this series, we'd like to welcome you. We do encourage active engagement through the Zoom chat function. If you have not already done so, if you could please put your name and community, company, organization, or state in the chat box, we'd really appreciate it. We'd also like to know what you hope to get out of the Floodplain Bootcamp series. Today's workshop is really just a kickoff for the series. What we're looking at doing is exploring the draft agenda, what to expect, to provide you with some important resources that are out there for floodplain managers, and of course, to get a better understanding of that Certified Floodplain Manager test and certification. Now, we do have Shilea Wingard, who is with the Montana Community Assistance Program in our floodplain department, and she's going to be monitoring the chat. She'll probably also be asking, if you're calling in on a phone number, she doesn't recognize your name, she's probably going to be asking you stuff in the chat like, hey, can I get some more information? We're going to be sending out a lot of like a really big welcome email to you. So it's going to be really important that we have your email address. And so there might be a point through this today's session where Shilea will say, wait a minute, I need to get I need to get somebody's name or their email address. But she'll try to do it through chat, but she can't get a hold of you through chat. She'll be asking about that as well. Okay, we got quite a few people from all over and some familiar names as well. So let's kick off the, what we're basing Floodplain Bootcamp on is actually this FEMA 480 document. Now, this document you can see has not been updated since February of 2005. They're working on it right now. For the most part, a lot of the information in here is extremely relevant, but there are a couple things that have changed in the National Flood Insurance Program, and that includes a lot of the mitigation information and also the flood insurance information. And so we'll actually bring in some additional information outside of what FEMA 480 has to kind of keep you with the most up-to-date information on those two topics. And part of that kickoff emails will actually provide you a PDF or a link to that FEMA 480 as well. So this is our draft agenda. How we tried to craft this is we know how busy everyone is. We know that floodplain management is not your only duty within your community. And so what we try to do is keep all of these series of workshops, these weekly workshops, down to about an hour. I will say on one of our mapping sessions, we might go a little bit over. The other thing that we're trying to do is actually have one time period where we can set up an in-house mapping exercise. And we know that that's really helpful when you can actually start using not only the paper maps, but also the flood insurance study. Even though it's all available online, I think trying to go through an understanding of how to use those products is always really helpful. And then that will make you more proficient when you're using some of the virtual options that are out there, or digital options for mapping. Now we're going to be jumping around a little bit this year. Mainly this is it's because of some of our speakers and their availability. We also wanted to bump up Unit 10, and that's the mitigation section for FEMA 480, just because we want to try to get that out ahead of it before we start getting into, especially for Montana, before we start getting into some of the stuff that we see that creates havoc in our communities, such as ice jams and potential spring flooding. So we want to try to get that unit out there early. And with that, as you're going through the series, one of the things that we'll ask you to do is start kind of preparing for these upcoming workshops. So as we mentioned, today is the kickoff workshop. Next week, we'll start with Unit 1. One of the things that we'll encourage you to do is start reviewing FEMA 480 and that Unit 1 section, and then our presenters will be able to break it down a little bit more for you. So just trying to get out ahead of it and just try to get familiar with the material before the presentation. And that way, if you have questions during your presentations, you'll be a little bit more familiar with the subject matter as well. Now, as I mentioned, we are moving up Unit 10. And Unit 10 on mitigation, there's been a lot of changes to the mitigation program since especially 2005. Now, there is a mitigation IS course. This is one that our presenter, Nadine Wadsworth, has, for the last few boot camp sessions, have said, look, this is really critical important for anyone who's participating in the series to actually do this mitigation course. So before her December 15th workshop, we encourage you, again, we'll put all of this information in this huge kickoff email to you on the series, but really before December 15th to jump onto that IS 2112, that mitigation training through FEMA, so that you could be prepared for that December 15th workshop as well. There's also a lot of help out there for floodplain management, a lot of great tools. One that has come up in the last couple of years is a tool that was created by FEMA and the Association of State Floodplain Managers. It's available online at no cost. It's a great series. It also gives you this basic information about floodplain management. And I encourage you to look at the series, to jump on it. You can take it in two different ways. Either you can look at taking it for a credit and certification, or you can go in there and just pick and choose those areas that maybe you want a little bit more information on. But again, this is one that we do encourage, like even if you are taking this series, it's really important to kind of make sure that as you're embarking on floodplain management, to kind of look at all these resources and information that's available to you. So you can finish that at your own pace. If you are a certified floodplain manager, if you actually complete that whole course to actually earn your continuing education credits, you can do that. You can get up to 12. So that's an option for you as well, especially if you're taking this course as a kind of a refresher today. And as I mentioned, they have that option to do it for professional credit, or you can do it as a reference guide. And sometimes we'll use it just to kind of go back and forth if we have a question that has come up, or if we want to pull information for maybe a workshop that we're doing, maybe Floodplain Bootcamp as well. But there's a lot of great information on that course. There's also a lot of other information that is out there, and a lot of great courses out there that can kind of help you if you are in floodplain management at the local level and you want to know more information about the program and floodplain management in general. There's a lot of courses that are offered, and we're gonna send you a document that was tailored specifically for those new to floodplain management, that will have a lot of these links that you can kind of go on and reference some of these other workshops that are available. But we also have a lot of professional engineers and surveyors that take our courses as well. And so there's a lot of information out there for you. So I would encourage everyone, as you're kind of diving into floodplain management, to kind of take a look at everything that's out there. I know it can get overwhelming, but as something comes up, it's great to kind of be able to reference, okay, what is, we heard somebody mention this increased cost of compliance. What does that mean? And you can go to this training. It just helps you get a little bit more familiar with not only the terminology, but some of the things that you might encounter as you're dealing with floodplain management, whether it's in your community or maybe it's one of your clients as well. As we mentioned, there's a lot of information out there and study resources. One of the things that's really important if you're brand new to floodplain management is to understand that the federal regulations, actually parts 59 and 60, and like we said, especially 60.3, list out all the federal requirements for floodplain management. And this is, again, information that we try to incorporate in all the study resources, but it's one that you should be familiar with, and we'll get the links to you as well. And as I mentioned, the FEMA 480, this is a study guide desk reference for local officials, has a lot of great information in it. Just be aware that when it comes to like insurance and mitigation, there have been updates and changes. And we're hoping that this FEMA 480, I think, Kim from Wyoming's on too. I think Kim and I have been hearing that they've been updating this document for the last probably 10 years. So hopefully we'll see that in the next year or two come out as well. One of the other things when we deal with floodplain management is that there's this little federal law you'll hear about in some of the workshops. Probably, I believe it's going to come up in maybe unit 2, and then you'll see it in some of the further units for FEMA 480, is that under floodplain management, as a floodplain manager, you cannot issue a floodplain permit unless you have all other applicable applications or applicable permits. So that means that as a floodplain manager, you're working with that applicant to understand that there's other agencies, other departments that they may need to obtain permits for. You're the last stop. And because of that, it's really important to kind of understand what those other applicable permits might be. And so you'll hear in this series a lot of information about these associated programs that you'll be dealing with floodplain management. And one of them is, of course, the EPA's Clean Water Act, Section 404. So we'll be giving you information on how to access that specific information and other information for different agencies and departments that kind of overlap with floodplain management as well. We do go over coastal information, even though this is the Montana Floodplain Bootcamp. Understand that floodplain management includes a huge component on coastal regulations and coastal issues and coastal mapping. And if you are trying to obtain your Certified Floodplain Manager certification, it's a national certification. It's going to require you to understand the coastal provisions as well. So there'll be information on coastal issues such as the Coastal Barrier Resource Act. And of course, like we mentioned, we'll be giving you tons of information about FEMA's independent study courses. Again, these are all things that you can do at your own pace, and looking at ways to just understand floodplain management a little bit more, or prepare you for that Certified Floodplain Manager's test. Yeah, Kim, we're anxiously waiting for it here. So as I mentioned, this series was actually kind of designed not just for those new to floodplain management, but in particular, those that are looking at taking that Certified Floodplain Manager exam to get that CFM certification. And so we just wanted to, today as part of the kickoff, we just really wanted to kind of go over not only what you're looking at for the series for the next few months, but also what is the CFM, and how, what's the importance of it, who actually administers it, and then how do you keep your CFM certification. And we, this is just the portion that we cover during this first workshop. That's why we call this the kickoff, so you have a better understanding. So as I mentioned, we were talking about a lot of resources out there and available to everyone. And One of the big resources, not just for the state, but for local floodplain administrators, is the Association of State Floodplain Managers. They have a lot of training that's available. They have an annual conference. They have a lot of networking opportunities. They work on everything across the board when it comes to the National Flood Insurance Program and floodplain management, and that includes a lot of mitigation issues that come up as well. And really, their mission is just like the National Flood Insurance Program. It's trying to help reduce flood damages and flood losses. How many of you, just kind of in the chat, how many of you actually heard of the ASFPM Association? Just yes or no if you've heard of them or not. And they're actually the association. Oh, good. All right. You know, a couple members there. Great. I'd encourage you to jump on their website. They have a lot of great information. I know sometimes it can be overwhelming, so just give us a holler. We can kind of help you navigate through that. But ASFPM is actually the entity that oversees the CFM exam and the certification. So we partner with them a lot here in Montana for different issues, especially national ongoing issues. They've been a huge resource, and I encourage you to kind of reach out to them if you have any questions or anything in particular in your community that you're looking for assistance for as well. Now, in Montana, there is the Association of Montana Floodplain Managers, and they are a chapter of the National Association of ASFPM. Now, we just got information. They just released their call for abstracts. They're looking at doing their annual conference at the end of February, beginning of March, that week here in Helena. And I guess we'll ask how many of you know or have heard about AM/FM and not the radio station? No? Okay. AM/FM is an excellent resource, especially here in Montana. They offer a lot of opportunities for networking. I know as a previous local floodplain administrator, that's how I was exposed to not just ASFPM, but also to networking and other floodplain administrators throughout the state. Really encourage you to kind of look at their website as well, and get to know their board. A lot of them, a lot of the board members actually are local floodplain administrators, or they are working in the private sector, and they've been on and associated with AM/FM for a number of years as well. So as we mentioned, the Certified Floodplain Manager, it's actually that program. It is through the Association of State Floodplain Managers. They actually created a baseline testing of professional competence in floodplain management. Now, it does require, to become a CFM, it does require passing an exam, and then, of course, doing your continuing education credits annually to maintain that certification. If you're looking at taking this exam, I will say it's not an easy exam. A lot of the questions are created, they're not just black and white. A lot of times the answers, you can look at them and almost rational, like most of those answers would fit that question. And so we're trying to, throughout the series, we'll try to give you little tips on, when you're taking that test and things to kind of look for and information to really focus on. But really what the CFM guidelines for kind of taking the test and preparing for the test is they encourage that those individuals that are interested in becoming a CFM should really have a couple years of experience. We see a lot of folks that will take it within a year, but it's really important to kind of have that experience and understand floodplain management a little bit more before you take this exam. Again, we'll provide you with all the information we possibly can. they have a lot of materials on their website, ASFPM does, that can kind of help you prepare. It is an overwhelming amount of information, but it's really good. You can just start kind of checking off the boxes. But that's why this is not, we would not encourage you to start studying this material and think you're going to be able to take it in a month. It is going to take some time to kind of understand. And there's so many parts and pieces to the National Flood Insurance Program. And there's so many parts and pieces, as you'll see, to the CFM exam as well. And just encouraging you, I've been a CFM since, I think it's been since 2005 now. So it's been a long time. It is a really good program. I encourage all of you, if you are not a CFM, to pursue this certification. It has been around since 1999. And it is that registered trademark of ASFPM as well. Now, one of the reasons, everybody has the reasons on becoming a CFM. Sometimes your job description might require that. I know at the state, we require that for floodplain management. But in your, if you're with a local community, they may say, look, if you don't have your CFM, we want you to get it within a year or two. Again, we can kind of help you at our office, try to stay on track. But really, the reasons for becoming a CFM, like I said, it might be required at your job, but it does provide that professional credibility. It helps you be confident in your professional knowledge. It also is that recognition, like we mentioned, the job advancement, and it provides an opportunity for continued education and just kind of being able to justify why you're interested in taking some of these other classes, or maybe attending a conference. All of the stuff are just good reasons on why you might want to become a CFM as well. And CFMs really do, I have seen it time and time again, really do make a difference. It does help reduce community liability because you have that certification, because you're administering floodplain management with a lot of knowledge, and hopefully a lot of experience. It is going to help reduce that community liability, hopefully promote that safer development. I mean, that's the whole premise on why they're looking at this program. And then also, you can play a role, and you should be, as a local floodplain manager, or if you're in the private sector, play a role in helping property owners understand ways to not only reduce their risk, but maybe to reduce their flood insurance premiums. That's huge, because flood insurance is going to continue to go up. And so it's really important to help them not only build safer, but also look at some of those concerns they might have on the cost for insurance. But also, you can help folks reduce that property damage, whether it's when they're building maybe new structures, or they're looking at improving existing structures, or if they're unfortunately dealing with recovery issue. All of this stuff is super important. And by having this kind of floodplain management training, it's just going to help you with those conversations with those property owners, with developers, and helping them understand the concerns, and maybe ways that they could build better in and around these areas that we consider high risk. They also have other things. That's why I said the floodplain management program kind of intertwines with other programs. And believe it or not, there's a lot of things that you do with floodplain management that can kind of help improve water quality, or maybe help improve wetland areas as well. And in turn, those areas, especially wetlands, can help reduce flood flows, or velocities, and sometimes the flood depths as well. So having like a healthy riparian area is only going to help improve, for local communities, the risk for flood damage down the road. So again, I know a lot of you are probably trying to contemplate, like, should we become a CFM or not? again, I encourage you to do so. I think it does really make a difference. And I know it was something that I was told I should probably pursue, and it did make a big difference on how I approach floodplain management just in general at the local level and now at the state level as well. So it is really easy. As far as becoming a CFM, there's a lot of information out there. You can find the CFM guide on the ASFPM website. They also have the application and fees. And the step 3 has been changed. You can take that exam, but now it's all electronic. So you don't have to wait for an organization to set up an exam, testing availability or workshop for you. You can actually take it on most of the college campuses around the state. ASFPM has a list of those areas that are available for you to take those exams as well. Now, your certification. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Shania.
Hey, I just want, as I'm going through attendance, I just wanted you make sure, you might not have had a chance to see, we have a lot of DES folks on, which I'm really impressed with. And so I just wanted to also, let you know that, so that you can kind of talk about how some of this stuff will help and pertain to their jobs as well.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Shailia. Thank you. And yeah, the disaster and emergency service and floodplain management, it just completely intertwines, as you guys know, that do it over, do emergency service. We work really close together. And if you are a local floodplain administrator and you don't know who your local emergency manager is, you really do need to reach out to them, because you guys should be partners. There's a lot of stuff that they are doing and working on for emergency management. That's really important for you floodplain managers, and to kind of work with your communities on staying safer. And in turn to your floodplain managers, they can offer a lot of support and help for all the emergency managers as well in your programs. So yes, we always talk, and we'll get into this in the next few weeks, but we talk about the 4 parts of the National Flood Insurance Program. And those 4 parts are the mapping. So knowing your risk, it's the regulations, how to build in those areas that have been identified as kind of high risk. There's a component on insurance, and insurance is kind of a form of mitigation. That's self kind of insurance for those folks that are in these areas or are concerned about potential flooding for their location. And then that last one is mitigation. And all those 4 parts have to work together. So it's really important having that understanding. That's why the mitigation section, like we said, there's been a lot of changes. We're really glad that Nadine Wadsworth will be able to walk everyone through that. But it's really important to kind of stay up to date with all those changes that are ongoing with those programs as well. So yeah, thank you, Shailia, for pointing that out. So how do you maintain that CFM? Your certification really is good for 2 years. Every workshop that we try to do, whether it's virtually or in person, we try to get continuing education credits through ASFPM so that it's available. And the way that they register, especially if you're doing something virtually, if you're participating, it's going to be through that chat function. There'll be a series of questions that we'll ask you throughout those events to say, just make sure that you're participating, and then we'll be able to get a certificate. I just got a request this morning from someone saying, hey, we took something last week, can we get a certificate for continuing education credits? So it's really easy to actually be able to maintain your CFM by attending one of the annual conferences, whether it's the state association, AMFM, or going to ASFPM. You can get up to 12 to 15 continuing education credits. So that's the majority of the credits that you'll need for that 2-year period as well. So let's talk about that exam topics. Kind of along the lines of what we're looking at in FEMA 480. this is how they typically break down that what information is being asked per topic for the CFM exam. Part of it is floodplain mapping, and I will say that has been a huge part of some of the changes that have occurred to this exam over the years. That's where we see a lot of people really struggle, is on some of that floodplain mapping, that with that section when it comes to the exam. So we really like to focus on that when we do our training. You have about 20-25% on the regulatory standards, the regulatory administrative procedures. Flood insurance is a big one. And what we always tell folks is that when we look at the flood insurance side of FEMA in the last few years, it has changed. A few years ago, they went to risk rating 2.0 and completely overhauled their flood insurance, how they handle flood insurance through the National Flood Insurance Program. Now, FEMA 480 has a lot of the basic information, and that information about flood insurance still hasn't changed, and we'll focus on that. With ASFPM, if there have been changes in the last probably 2 to 3 years, you will not see those changes reflected on their exam. So if you're looking at taking the CFM exam in the next year or two, you probably will not see anything referenced on the exam to risk rating 2.0. What you will see is basic fundamental flood insurance information, like how much coverage is available for a residential structure. So we will try to focus on that, but we will also, in addition, give you some additional information about the new risk rating program and the changes. So just we'll try to differentiate that within those workshops. Like, hey, if you're taking an exam, pay attention to this. If you're just dealing with general floodplain management, this is the additional information you should know about flood insurance. Flood hazard mitigation is the same way. There's been so many changes to that program, and a lot of the newer things that have come out, like BRIC, you will probably not see in that exam if you're taking it in the next year or two. And so we've asked ASFPM to provide information and updates when they start adding those exam questions to those programs, so we can kind of highlight those as we do these series. But as of right now, they've not made any major changes. You have another section here on natural and beneficial functions. This is where you start pulling in all these other programs, whether it's wetlands or the Army Corps 404, these other programs that are closely tied to floodplain management. This is that section that you will see mainly. I think it's like in unit, I think it's like unit 11, if I'm not mistaken. So we'll really focus on what those are, especially for the exam. And then you have another 5 to 10%. That's an overall context of floodplain management. So these top exam topics haven't changed. The percentage really hasn't changed in the last few years. And what you see on the exam is about 120 questions. And we try to lay this out for folks so that you're kind of have an understanding of what you can expect with that CFM exam, because we have so many people that jump on that want to know more about it and are actually attending these series so they can take that exam as well. So we do, through this series, we do talk about the Montana specific information. So in Montana, we actually have higher standards, and we'll go over that information, but understand that the test, that CFM exam, is based on the national standard. So if you're taking the exam, we always tell people you're going to probably have to forget a lot of the Montana specific information, but we'll point that out to you and try to make it easy for you as well. And as I mentioned, forget that new stuff. They wait for those programs to be around for a few years before they actually start putting in the test questions that are relevant to those different programs. And I can't stress this enough. I really do encourage everyone, if you are, to take the CFM exam and be part of the CFM program. But most folks know I'm not a big fan on how they sometimes word their questions and answers. And so sometimes what they try to do is trick you. So be very careful, read all the questions carefully when you're taking that exam as well. And then if you do have an opportunity to, if you're running into like a question, you might want to jot it down if you can, or just kind of reference it so that at the end, when you're getting through that digital exam, you might be able to say, hey, on this question, I answered it this way because of this rationale, and you might get partial credit. So just things to think about.
Hey, Trey,
Sure.
I know we're almost done. We have 37 people on this meeting, and I only have 20. I just have a handful who have like provided email or identified themselves. So if they could do that in the chat, I need your email, guys, because I'm setting up a class list. You'll only have to do it once, please. And then we'll be good to go. And if you work for DNRC Floodplain, send it to me anyway, because I can do it quick. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Shailia. It's hard when we're setting up this class list, and this first email is going to give you a ton of information. And it's going to give you kind of not just the agenda, but all of these other tools for floodplain management that we were providing to you. So yeah, thank you guys so much. I see a lot of you guys are starting to fill that in as well. But yeah, so we'll get this follow-up email out to you here in the next few days, kind of the next steps as far as participating in this series and on the workshops as well. So I mentioned we started this series about 5 years ago during COVID. I think we had probably 6 or 7 new DNRC employees that were looking at taking the CFM exam, and we were trying to train them on floodplain management as well. And so we put this together, and we put the series together for them, and then in turn, a lot of them started putting together some study guides and helps. And so we've listed those down as well. You can find them. Hopefully you can still access a lot of this information, but we have the Quizlet flashcards that they made and the Kahoot quizzes. And so a lot of them were actually trying to find ways to interact, especially when they were studying for the exam. So all of the stuff we will provide to you. And like I said, hopefully you can still access a lot of this information, but we'll get this out to you in that email as well. We also have an Excel flashcard deck, all these little things on just general floodplain management knowledge that you will need, not just for your day-to-day activities, but also mainly to help you with the exam as well, and the CFM study sheet. And so they're just really simple. We just wanted to kind of show, like on the Quizlet, they just have very simple questions that are out there. And believe it or not, as I'm bringing up this question here, and this was not intentional, just the other day when we, and I know Serena, you're on, when we were in Fromberg, and Serena and her crew from Carbon County were doing this update for citizens on the flood recovery from 2022. I just was discussing this topic with a property owner. So this stuff is, you're probably like, oh gosh, this, we're going back to school, but this stuff is relevant as you're talking with property owners, or if you're in the private sector and you're talking with some of your clients. But hopefully a lot of these tools will be able to help you. So again, we try to put together as much stuff as possible. A lot of it was created by our folks, our DNRC floodplain folks, as they were trying to prepare for taking the CFM exam. But we also tried to work with our counterparts over in FEMA Region 8 as they put together stuff for new floodplain managers or those new to floodplain management, some of the resources and tools. And so, yes, there's a lot of information out there. One of the things I always tell folks is, as you start going through the series of workshops or you're going through FEMA 480, I mean, if you guys can retain 10% of what is going on for that particular week or what you've read through FEMA 480, you are doing fantastic. That's why we see a lot of folks use this opportunity with Floodplain Bootcamp as a refresher. I mean, I heard, I think Ronnie, I know you're on. I heard Ronnie and other folks say, hey, yeah, I just like to jump on just to make sure I have those refreshers because they get stuff coming into their office every day and they want to make sure, hey, wait, I might not have picked that up last time, but now that makes more sense because I had this question coming into my office. So you'll see us quite a few people that are participating in Floodplain Bootcamp. Some of them are brand new and some of them are folks that have been doing it for a while. And I encourage you to kind of reach out to each other and kind of work together, trying to understand, reach out to our folks if you have any questions. But we really do appreciate everybody jumping on today. And we look forward to moving through this series. And I have to agree with Shailia. We're really excited to see all of our emergency service counterparts. Really appreciate all that you do and how you work so well with your local floodplain administrators. So with that, we will stay on and we will open it up if anyone has any questions for us. And I'll go ahead and
before they jump off, some of them still haven't given me emails. So that's fine if you guys don't want the invites to future Zooms. You may just have to reach out to me and ask for them and I'll send them to you.
Yeah, and
but some of you guys, I don't know who you are and I can't figure it out. So just reach out to me and I can get you the Zooms.
Yeah, and you guys will get inundated with a ton of Zoom invites. The moment we have this list, you'll get a ton of Zoom invites for all of our workshops for this series. And then you'll get that one huge email. And then it gets really manageable after that. We're not going to be sending out a lot of stuff, but you'll get this initial shot. So it's December 1st, which is unbelievable. So you'll have all this time on your hands to be able to accept all of these multiple Zoom invites that you'll start receiving. But yeah, if you could please make sure you get your email address if you're interested over to Shailia so that we can get all of this great information out to you. It's a lot easier for us to do it at first because what we do worry about is we don't get those Zoom invites with everybody on there and we have to add you. We're afraid that we might miss some of those Zoom invites. We'd have to do it each individually. So thank you so much for jumping on. Like I mentioned, this is just our kickoff. We look forward to meeting with you guys weekly. And again, do not hesitate to reach out. We're going to have a lot of great speakers. I think this is the only one I have slated to teach unless somebody is not, if somebody's out sick or they're having to travel. So I think you'll see we'll have Nadine Wadsworth with our floodplain mapping team. We'll have Brent Zundel, who is one of our regional engineers. He actually oversees our regional engineering program. Perry, most of you know she used to be with our mapping team, and now she's one of our regional engineers. She's going to be presenting. We'll also have Anthony Joyce in our office. I think he's going to do the next unit. Shailia is going to take on a lot of the presentations for this workshop as well. So we're really excited. And again, thank you. And I hope everyone has a wonderful weekend. And we'll stay on too. If you have any questions, just feel free to come off mute.